Hey everyone, my name's Dalton. I'm Ball Fabric's installation manager. Today we're going to show you how to properly measure and install privacy screen on your fence. So we're going to go ahead and start measuring this fence. We're going to hook the rope tape on the outside of the tension bar about halfway up the fence. Then we're going to pull our rope tape down to the end of the run that we're trying to measure. We want to pull our tape tight, but not overly tight. So when we come to the end of the fence here, we can see our measurement is 37 feet, 6 inches. Now from the edge of the tension bar, I'm measuring back about 2 inches so that when we pull the screen tight, it ends right about here instead of ending past the tension bar where we wouldn't be able to get enough tension on it to make the whole panel smooth. So we're going to measure the finished height of this section of fence. While we're picking a spot to measure the finished height on the fence, we want to pick not the lowest point, but a medium point so that when the screen comes down to the ground, it's not laying on the ground and we can properly attach it to the bottom of the fence. You want to avoid low spots in the fence to measure and pick kind of an average point that you make sure the screen won't be touching the ground at any point. We're going to go ahead and clip our tape onto the corner of the top diamond link, and then we're going to measure to about 4 inches above the ground. We want it a little bit above the ground because if it's too close to the ground, when you come in to cut the grass, people will cut the screen and you don't want to have nicks in your screen. So we're going to go ahead and start adding in our first panel to this line of fence. We're going to start by pulling our screen up to the top of the panel where we measured before, this top diamond link. And we're going to start the screen right at the tension bar on the left-hand side of the line of fence we're making. We're going to put the first zip tie around this tension bar here by reaching back behind it. And we're lining our windscreen up with this top diamond link of the fence. After we put the first zip tie in, we're going to put the second zip tie to kind of hold the screen level. Next, we're going to add in another zip tie a couple feet down the fence line, following that same link on the fence. This is going to help hold the windscreen level down the fence as we get started with our first few zip ties. After you get that first one in, you can come back to the beginning and start adding in zip ties along the vertical edge. So we're going to keep going down this first tension bar of the fence. It's really important to keep the screen square here because this is going to set the tone for the entire fence line as we work our way down this way. We're going to go ahead and finish this first panel by putting a small zip tie here on the last grommet around the tension bar. This is the last grommet before the corner grommet at the bottom. The corner grommet at the bottom, we want to go ahead and add our 120-pound zip tie to help securely fasten it to the fence. Instead of attaching to the tension bar, we're actually attaching to the link just below the bottom grommet. To finish the bottom corner of this first panel, we're going to add a second zip tie to the corner by adding it in just like this and around the tension bar to help hold the screen securely in place at the bottom. To finish the top corner of this first panel, we're going to add an additional zip tie into this corner grommet to help securely hold it into the fence. This creates an L shape with the 2 zip ties to help hold the panel square. At Ball Fabrics, we add in 3 grommets to the corner to help securely fasten the screen to the fence. Other manufacturers might only add in 1 grommet to the corner. This is a good reason to add 2 zip ties to the corner to help securely hold your screen to the fence. Now that we have our first corner secure, we're going to go ahead and tack the rest of the screen up onto the fence. To do this, we're just going to pull the screen lightly tight and add our zip ties into the fence to follow that top link of the chain link that we started at the beginning. Now that we have our corner up and our screen tacked up to the fence, we're going to start adding in our primary zip ties across the top. To do this, we're just going to add the zip tie to the grommet and pull our screen up to that top notch we talked about before. As we move along the fence, it's important that the zip ties are pulling the screen forward in the direction you're moving instead of backwards, which will cause wrinkles in the fence over time as you add the zip ties in. As we're adding these top zip ties in, it's important to remember to trim them properly so that no one gets cut on the fence. You want to push the zip tie back just a little bit and clip it off so that there's no catches on the fence. So if someone's walking by, they don't cut their hand on a zip tie. So we're going to go ahead and continue adding the zip ties across the top of the fence, making sure we keep working in that forward direction to pull the screen tight. If you're working with a partner, after you get a couple feet down the fence, it's time that they can start working on the bottoms of the windscreen. This is going to be the most productive for finishing your project quickly. As we're working on the bottom zip ties on our panel, it's important to keep a couple things in mind. We want to keep pulling the screen forward just like we were doing on the top and angling at a slight angle forward in the direction we're pulling the screen. As we're tensioning the windscreen, we don't want to over tighten it. This will cause wrinkles throughout. It can also cause the bottom of the windscreen to be pulled further than the top, ending up with an uneven seam at the end of the windscreen. We're going to go ahead and finish the first end of this first panel. To do this, we're going to add a zip tie into the corner grommet and really pull the screen forward by adding it to the forward next diamond link. We want to pick a link on the fence to follow with the seam to help keep it nice and vertical as we go down. Starting at the top, we're going to add zip ties all the way down, keeping in mind that we're following that link and only pulling the screen tight enough to meet up with that link. So the person on the top is going to finish first. The bottom person is going to follow behind. Make sure they add this last zip tie into the bottom corner to pull it at the same angle as the top, keeping in mind that we're following that same diamond link on the fence. Adding in the next panel starts similarly to that first panel. We're just going to match up and follow this line down. This first grommet, we're going to add a zip tie at a slight angle backwards to set our screen in place. We want to make sure we don't over tighten it, but make sure it will follow that line vertically down. After I add my first zip tie in, I usually come down 2 or 3 grommets and add another zip tie to help hold the screen level as I do the seam. It's important as we're doing this vertical seam on the second panel that we add our zip ties not through both grommets but directly to the fence. It's a common misconception that the grommets on 2 panels of windscreen should line up. You don't have to have the grommets lining up. It's actually fine if they're offset because you never want to have a zip tie go through 2 grommets. It's better that the zip tie goes behind the next screen and attaches directly to the fence. As we're doing the bottoms of this second screen, it's important not to over tighten these bottom zip ties. If you start off over tightening the zip ties, it'll cause wrinkles later on down the screen. We want to slightly tighten the zip ties, but not over tighten them. You want it to be taut so no wrinkles are in the screen. Remember, you can always come back and re-tighten them later, but you can't untighten them. As we're adding this second panel in, it's a really good example of how picking the right spot to measure your finish height is really important. You can see in this low spot, we're way off the ground. But if we come further down the fence line, our screen is almost touching the ground. So when we're measuring this, we want to make sure we measure the finish height in this spot and not at that low spot.